Sometimes when you have stocks that do get ahead of themselves or a market that gets ahead of themselves, it does take a little bit of time for those patterns to kind of right themselves. They get all loose, they get, a little messy. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the stocks that can kind of act as a guide for when things are getting a little bit ahead of themselves, whether it's too extended, whether it's going at a different rate. I always think of uh, the Top Gun, right? When they're going vertical, they can only go vertical for so long in those fighter jets before they stall out and
Right.
and get in trouble. But maybe we start with Nvidia, and we can actually go back in time here a little bit, because while Nvidia might have gotten ahead of itself recently, there are a number of times that we could look at in the past. I mean, from this move in 2016 that it had to the end of 2016, it seemed like was pretty dramatic, and it had the base for a little while after that. Um, any other time periods that kind of you want to look at?
Yeah, there was a time period. I guess you would have to change your date back to early 2022 to see what happened, because the stock, as you mentioned, um, the stock back in 2020 had a move, really a real nice move into 147, and this is, I guess, split adjusted, but and then it got ahead of itself at that point. Then it went sideways for the longest time, and that was almost 9 months, about 8 months before it set up again. And I would put a buy point in on May 28th, 2021, where the stock came out of almost a little cup and handle there, and then had a great move to 208, and then came pulled back, had another move to 2030, sorry, 230. So all the way back in 2020, the stock had a great move into 147, and that's another time to study a stock that gets ahead of itself and then has to base out for a long period of time. And that actually based out for almost a year, I guess, where the next buy point was at at the end of May of 2021, and had a great move from 160 to 208, and pulled back, built another little base, had another move to 230, and then pulled back. And then, and if I draw a trend line from 208 to 230 and continue that on, you'll see that the stock started really getting ahead of itself and had almost like a climactic move into really 11/4/2021, and then base for a few days, and then jumped all the way to 346. So when a stock starts going up at that rate of acceleration, you use the fighter jets. I always used an example of an airplane in an air show that skims along the runway at just a few feet off the ground and then turns straight up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at some point it starts to stall, and that's what this did. And so when you get an extended move like that, and this was really very climactic, because you go 200 to 346 in a matter of about 6 or 7 weeks, then
Yeah.
that just tells me that, hey, it has to take a break. It has to either go sideways for a long period of time or correct and let the earnings keep on coming through. And so it just got ahead of itself. So that was one example. Then if you move farther out into, let's see, well, I guess you could even move out to present day. I mean, I guess we could have used other examples, but if you move out to reset the chart at today's action, you'll see that it had a nice move. It broke out at 50 back in the first few days of the year, had a move to 90. That's almost 100% move. And even that was going up at a certain rate, then started getting very steep, and then had that reversal at 97.40 and had to build a base. And it did it for almost 4 months of sideways action. And so when you see signs like that, you see reversals on big volume after a dramatic move, then know that it's going to take more time. Not just, it's very few stocks that are going to sit there and have a really tight pennant formation and then take off and go again. It does happen,
Mhm.
but it's very, very rare when that occurs. So this took off and had another move, coming out of, that would be May 23rd. It broke out of that base and then accelerated up, and also had a dramatic move all the way up to 140. So so far this year it's gone from 50 to 140. And if I take a trend line from all the way back at a previous high, I look for other highs. I look all the way back to the July high of 48. Uh, Back, that would be July of last year of
Mhm.
2023, and I draw that all the way to 97.40, and the stock goes right through that and keeps on going, and then gets that big reversal again, and did it on big volume, and this time it did it on big volume, and then did it for 3 days in a row, 3 big down days. And to me, again, that's an acceleration that got ahead of itself. The stock started correcting, and then it didn't rally at all. At least it didn't rally on volume. It did rally on price, but it didn't get back. At 3 days, in 3 days, it took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Took like 12 days to
Yeah.
recoup what it lost in 3. I
Mhm.
always look at that. How fast can a stock recover? Well, it didn't recover enough and fast enough, and then it broke again, and then now today it broke again. So when you see that, when you draw longer term trend lines and stock starts breaking them to the upside, time is starting to run out, and you should start acting accordingly.
So one of the things that I remember when kind of studying climax tops with Bill and kind of nailing down some of the rules and everything like that, one of the things he would talk about is if you were just coming out of a base and you're going with power, he liked that, right? That it's, you know, you get that kind of power, you're getting like 20%, 25% in a matter of 3 weeks. And at the beginning of a base, that's good, right? That leads to his 8 week hold rule.
Yeah.
But you're talking about something different. You're talking about something where a stock has been running for a while. It's not coming out of a first stage base or a second stage base. It's coming out of maybe a later stage base and it's been running. And then you kind of change that angle. It's a very different thing, right? The
Yes,
concept.
you have to see how long it's been running,
Hmm.
how many multiples, and usually these are where stocks are up 100% or 150 or 200% or more, and then you have to just draw your trend lines to see if the stock is getting above that. But this is not, you can use this not only for climactic moves, but you can also use it for just moves where they're not climactic, but they just kind of get ahead of themselves. And why don't if you can move to Howmet is an example of that recently,
Hmm.
where I'm looking at the present day chart, and I take a trend line from 51 all the way back in July of last year, 51.34. I draw
And do
it
you do this
going.
on daily or weekly charts?
I do this on daily charts. I
Okay.
just I just can see them better. You could probably still do it on a weekly chart too,
Mhm.
and maybe you'll have more. You might have more trend lines.
I know Bill preferred doing it on weekly charts, especially the logarithmic, scale, but I was just kind of checking with you on what you prefer. So
Yeah,
51.34 back in
yeah.
July.
Back in July, and then I connect that with 69.55,
Mhm.
and you can see that it came in, and the stock gapped on earnings and continued to move. And it got some very big volume, continued to move higher, but now it's starting to break. It broke just about 4 weeks ago, and that was on 614, where it broke that 21-day moving average, came in a little more, tried to rally, but then interesting, it rallied up into that 50-day moving average, and then broke a bit today. Now, I'm not saying this thing is just going to roll over and die and be, back to 40, in a matter of weeks or a few months. But I'm just saying that on something like this, it's just going to have to spend more time going sideways. And
Mhm.
because what happens is so many people are attracted to the big move that they think it's going to sit there for 2 weeks and then take off again.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of these things, when they have the big move and everybody's talking about them and everybody's attracted to them, it's going to take usually months. And 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and even longer. If it's a huge move, it could take over a year for the stock to reset. Even if the earnings and the fundamentals are great, lots of times it just takes time for those earnings to come through, bring the multiples down, and so the stock is reset to go again.
Mhm.
So on this Howmet is an example, and then here's a few other more recent examples is Race, RACE, which is Ferrari. And yeah, you can again draw some simple trend lines off the highs, from the highs, to see if something's getting ahead of itself. And I'm using 329 from July of last year to 369. And I guess you could also do that. I mean, you can do the same thing on a weekly, go back even farther. But what it's showing you is that again, this is getting ahead of itself and had this move from 330 in January of this year all the way up to 442. So now look what's happened to this since it hit that spot and then came off 3 or 4 days of pretty good volume. It's just been going sideways.
Mhm.
And that's why I think that you should be aware of when things are so good and stocks are getting ahead of themselves, that it's a good time to take some profits and just it and maybe, I mean, not sell a great position or a stock you've been with for a long time, but just know that you're gonna have to be patient when it gets ahead of itself and does something like that.